Welcome. My name is Kelly Riordan. I'm a classical musician turned creative entrepreneur, and this is the best platform for musicians that are looking to shape their career by thinking outside the box. Michelle, I'm really excited for today. I know we met a few weeks ago officially, and today I'm super excited to delve into more of your career story and what you've got going on. And as always, I like to start at the very beginning. So when was the first time that you came into contact with the piano?
My mom pulled me into her bedroom with the yellow pages open, and she said, "Do you want to take piano lessons?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And I was 4, and we went to the piano teacher, and I remember looking at my hand because I had to see if it was big enough to be able to start lessons. So I stretched out my hand in front of me, and I thought, "Wow, I hope it's big enough." And then I had the most amazing beginner piano teacher, and she just gave me such a love and discipline and fun, and she was lovely. I mean, I think we all need those very warm mentors in our lives from the beginning to give us such a great foundation. And then she passed me on to someone who was more advanced and just continued my training from there.
Now, at 4 years old, what made you want to start? Do you remember what it was that got you excited about the instrument?
My mom sat with me at the piano and taught me basics. And then I was singing in my dad's band when I was 3, and I was in some kind of dance group, singing and dancing group. So I think it was just music was all around me, and it just seemed very natural and normal to just start lessons.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And a very musical family, it sounds like, which is so cool.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
My dad drummed in a band for 10 years, a country band. And my mom did, her grade 8 piano, which is a Canadian conservatory that we have. So she definitely has the basics. They wouldn't call themselves musical, but they definitely gave me the foundation and got me started.
That's awesome. And it's important, I think, for young students to have that foundation. But then as you're getting older and as you're growing and maturing in your own musical production, and then also figuring out what you want to do with your life, at what point was it clear to you this is something that might be a profession long term?
Oh, that's always a big question, right? Like, were the stars shining in the sky and it told you that you needed to become a musician and that you
The
would be on
magical sign.
stage? Yeah, exactly. Was there a big sign? Were you picked by hand by, No, I think at 18, it was for me, I had to choose between playing basketball at the college level or moving away to study with a higher piano teacher level, at a higher level. So I chose piano. And I miss basketball every single day. But I started my bachelor's and just went from there. I don't know. It was just something I enjoy. It's something that I had a lot of energy from. I love working with people. I love accompanying. I know I was playing for everyone as much as I could. I was sight reading. I was playing everyone's jury. I was playing everyone's competitions. I was, getting a coffee at midnight so that I could keep practicing. I mean, it was just like the wild early years. And then I met my teacher that I studied with in Montreal at a summer program. And he just like rocked my world. He was so amazing. And I asked him if I could actually just transfer and study with him in Montreal. And he accepted. And that changed everything for me because then I left my province, moved to the French land, as we called it, and found my way there. And that just opened up my world because Montreal is very European. It's very cultural. It's very open-minded and not so much where I'm from in Canada. That's more like small town. People tend to stay more local. So yeah, moving to Montreal was a big, awesome step for me. And it really made the leap to Europe so much, actually made it possible because then I had colleagues who were going over to study and doing summer programs, and Europe just opened up. And now I've been here almost 10 years.
Yeah. And that's an important note. Where are you located right now?
So I live in Maastricht in the Netherlands, and I'm from Grand Prairie, Alberta, which is 5,000 kilometers away. So my journey has just like progressed eastward for the last few years.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so backing up a little bit to college, what was your main focus? I know you said you were doing a little bit of everything and playing for everyone and doing a lot of collaboration, but was there one genre that you were really focused in? Were you more of a solo player, or were you always trying to play collaboratively?
Yeah, I think my focus has always been like a solo career with chamber music, and then with so much collaborative, so accompanying for everyone. But my bachelor's was in piano performance, so with that came doing competitions and getting the solo programs ready. But I just really loved working with people, and I found it so exciting. And just people were like throwing music at me, and I just loved being everywhere all the time. I think that's so exciting about our careers is that we get so many different projects and people to work with and places to go and new music, and it's just a lot of fun.
Were there moments in your undergraduate studies where you were feeling overwhelmed by all that possibility, or was it always just really clear to you that you were gonna say yes to as much as possible?
I usually said yes to too much and then would get myself in trouble, you know? Actually, I still kind of do that. Yeah, no, I mean, I think in the end, like by the end of the year when you're totally burned out and, you know, crying at the workload, you're like, maybe I shouldn't have accompanied everyone. But no, in general, I think surrounding yourself with people who have a lot of energy and excitement, it just kind of kept me going. Plus the, you know, midnight coffee runs.
Yeah, the healthiest of all habits, right?
I
The lack
know.
of sleep.
And then oral skills the
Uh,
next morning at 8 a.m.
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But the
super
practice
on
rooms were
pitch for
open.
that.
Yeah. The practice rooms were
Oh.
open 24/7. So I actually once slept there in the piano case so that I could go to class the next morning.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. The dedication is amazing, and I'm sure it's
I
part
know
of
it
a
was
large part of why things are so successful for you right now, but oh my goodness.
I would not recommend that.
Okay, so on that note, let's say someone who's listening is in undergrad right now,
Yeah.
and, obviously, we're gonna talk more about your career and what's happened since school, but you had this amazing solo career, you're playing with a lot of, incredible other performers, prolific recording career. What in undergrad do you wish you knew, or what piece of advice would you give to someone who's in that position right now?
Ugh. Um, I think a lot of pianists today don't think about the collaborative aspect as much. Like for example, sight reading is a really important skill set that you need to have.
Mm.
So I think it's really good to play with as many people as possible and just learn to read really fast, because if you can quickly pick up a piece of music, it's just going to mean that, you know, when people do give you stuff last minute, it's not so much of a panic because you're like, I can handle this. And you know, getting as much performing experience as you can, doing as many competitions. I think what I would tell myself is, obviously I've had to overcome a lot of perfectionism and pressure, and not to put too much pressure on things, but to really like think about the process. And especially moving to Montreal, because I had to restart, and that was still my undergrad. I did 2 years of my undergrad in Edmonton and then two in Montreal, and he had to rip down my technique and kind of start over from scratch, which was like obviously discouraging. And then I wasn't the best anymore. I was at the bottom or the middle of the pack, you know? So then that was also
Mhm.
like, oh no, like I thought, you know, when you're a big fish in a small pond, um, so I think I would just say, like, yeah, continue with the consistency and don't measure so much in the moment. Try to look at the overview of like the growth and the long term investment that you're making.
And I think splitting a four-year degree into two different programs in two different schools, that's also pretty gutsy. I mean, it takes a big transition. You get established for the first 2 years. Obviously, you hope all the credits will transfer. In that moment, aside from, of course, an incredible teacher that was really exciting to work with, was there anything else that was drawing you towards a larger program? Was
No,
there part of you that
that's a
wanted
really
to
good
not be
point.
the big fish?
Yeah. That's a really good point. So I think when you come from a smaller institution and you quickly, you know, like I won the concerto competition in my first year, and I could kind of sense that maybe I knew there was a bigger level, especially when I went to a summer
Mm.
program, and I was like, oh, what? Like people are playing crazy well, and I mean, I got to try and find my way here. So, and then I also switched to it was a French university, so all of my studies suddenly became in French, including my piano lessons. So that was, and I had done French immersion as a child, but it was still quite a challenge to start speaking French again, because we had just all listened and could read, but didn't speak because it wasn't cool for us Anglophones.
Mm.
So what was really drawing me was just recognizing that there was more out there. There was a bigger world out there
Mm.
than what I'd previously seen, and there was a group of Anglophones who moved over, and one of the girls I was extremely close to. So I felt very safe. I felt like the way had been kind of forged for me, and I was just following in the footsteps of some close friends. And then when I got there were about 12 of us Albertans. So we kind of created our own little group within the Frenchies, and we were like, okay, where do we belong? And we got to stick together because this is crazy. Everything's different. Everything's in a different language. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just a completely different world. So yeah, those things were drawing to me, and excellence, continuing to pursue. I mean, you always want to try and be the best of what you can do. And when I found such an inspiring teacher, I mean, I studied with Jean Saunier, and he, still is one of the best musicians that I've ever seen or heard. So
That's awesome. And having that connection to someone, obviously coming to the university for that professor, it I think it does help inspire you because you've got this attachment to that university to that education and there's a clear goal in mind, like learn every single nugget I possibly can from this human while I'm here, and then I have to move on. And so after school, as because correct me if I'm wrong, you moved pretty quickly to Europe after
Yeah,
undergrad,
that's an
correct?
it was a very interesting point in my life because everyone, kind of follows the academic ladder. So we do the bachelor's, then you do the master's, which kind of became the
Yep.
new bachelor's. And then I did an artist diploma 1 year. And then the next step was the doctorate. And I really wrestled with
Mm.
that. I was like, do I do this or not? Because you don't want to limit your opportunities in the future. And, if you wanted to
Mm-hmm.
get a faculty position in North America, it's kind of become normal that you need it now. And so I was wrestling with this a lot, but there were some people who had gone to Europe for like a semester and studied in Vienna, for example. So I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll just do a couple years in Europe. I got some funding from the Canadian government to study privately with a great teacher that I met. Again, like for anyone listening who's in their undergrad, do summer programs. 100%. The most important thing you need to do is, besides school, is do summer programs and competitions and go meet teachers, because you're just going to learn so much outside of your technique and your school and your thinking, and you're going to hear new things, and that's so important. So because of a summer program, I met someone who was teaching in Switzerland, came over here. But it was interesting because I told my teacher in Montreal, I said, save me a spot. I'm coming back in 2 years. I'll do my doctorate. He's like, great. You're always welcome. No problem. So I actually kept my apartment. I kept my piano. I kept everything. I tried to like freeze my life because I'm like, don't worry, everybody. I'm coming back. And then, yeah, it's been 10 years over here. So that didn't really work. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So when you made that transition, I guess, and so obviously the idea was I'm going to go study with this particular teacher. Did you know pretty quickly once you had arrived and settled in that this is a place you might want to stay more long
I
term?
think within 5 months of being in Europe, I kind of looked around and I was like, whoa, like this could be a lot longer than I did originally
Mm.
anticipated. And I quickly found a community of people here who were, quickly became friends, and I started to feel more connected. And then looking at how quickly you can travel. So, like, I live 5 minutes from Belgium, 4 hours by car to Paris, 3 hours to Amsterdam. And I thought there's so much gold here, things to dig into. And the other big principle is like, you sow where you reap where you sow. Said that backwards. So if you're if you're gonna start over in a new place, to turn around and leave after 2 years it's like before you reach the harvest. It's before you
Mm.
get the reward of what you've invested. And the first 2 years were hard. I mean, it wasn't at all a walk in the park to find my way. And so yeah, I thought, okay, maybe I should stick this out and see what can come from this.
That's awesome. And it's been obviously a fruitful 10 years. So
Yeah.
talk about your current situation a little bit and what your career looks like today, because you have a lot of plates in the air.
Yeah, so COVID happened, and all my concerts stopped. Before that, first of all, I did pursue the performing career as much as I could, which meant that I started a concert series here called Opus 16, which is named after Rachmaninoff's Opus 16. He called it Musical Moments. And so since 2015, I've been performing quite regularly with chamber music. Chamber music is just somewhere where I feel really safe, comfortable, probably because I love other people, working with other people, but also because I really require the motivation to come from having a rehearsal planned. I think as a freelancer, as a self-entrepreneur person, if I don't have anything in the schedule, I just like kind of spiral and get depressed, right? So it's like, I need someone else and I need someone else for the motivation that we're going to practice and we're going to get this program ready. And like after years of doing that, now I'm at a place where I can self-motivate for a solo concert, but it took a long time to get there. So chamber music for me was a really great way to kind of set that boundary of like, okay, we've got limits, we're going to make a plan. And so I started playing a lot of gigs, a lot of background music gigs, just taking anything I could over here. And then that grew and it was starting to grow. And then everything got canceled because of Corona. And right before the lockdown, I started the Fearless Artist Mastermind with my best friend in Paris, Deanna Petre, who's coming on the podcast later. And that was really, it's a professional development movement to help musicians who are in our position, professional freelancers who need community, who need structure, who need to know that they're not alone, who have goals and want to attain them. It's really a way to encourage and provide trainings and talk about the business side of what we do. I mean, I know you guys do this, you and your husband as well. So it's extremely important information that we did not learn in school that we think we should have. So
Yes.
networking, how to pitch yourself, how to market yourself, coming up with all your social media content, building your career, the entrepreneurial side, So so that's been growing for the last few years. We do masterminds and coaching. And then I recently started working with Candlelight Concerts, and they have an incredible story of only being 3 years old, and now they work in 150 cities globally. And because I'm so fortunate to live in the center of Europe, I get to play all around me. So within kind of like a 4 or 5 hour radius. So for example, I'm going from Amsterdam, the top of the Netherlands, to the south of France just in this month, and Brussels and Lille in France, and many different cities. And so it's extremely fun and exciting, and it's close to home. and where I'm from in Alberta, you drive 5 hours and you get to the next city. And so that's been really cool, the performing career of things. And then I have an album coming out of original pop songs that I wrote, because going back to singing with my dad's band when I was 3, that never really left. But I didn't ever develop it. I kind of had this side thing that I was just singing in church or singing for fun at home. And then, I had some people just really encouraging me, when are you going to release an album? When are you going to write songs? I'm like, oh, I can't do that. It was just like, it was so overwhelming. But I ended up finally getting, again, strategies and help and a team. And I crowdfunded an album last July. And so I'm in the process of releasing it.
That's awesome. That is awesome. I think the first single came out in the fall, correct?
Yeah, exactly. November.
And then we have another one coming out
this Friday.
Soon.
Yeah. In 3 days.
So definitely coming up before anyone's listening to this podcast. So by the time you hear this, it'll be live. Yes. So you should definitely go check it out. But that's really exciting. Okay, so I want to back up a little bit. So you first move, settle in, and then you start performing a lot. So you said around 2016 is when Opus 16 started.
Yeah, exactly.
What inspired that, or what kind of connections did you have to make in order to get that off the ground?
It was through the Conservatorium here. Somebody had knew of a series. It started. I have 2 venues, and one of the cities is 45 minutes away. And he said, "There's this series that's going. They've been going for years, and they have an older board, and the board is ready to retire, and they're looking for new, fresh ideas." So I went and spoke to them, and they agreed to let me take on the artistic director role. But it was very small. I was playing on an upright piano. It's funny because I just had a meeting this morning, so we were remembering the early years. So an upright piano. I didn't know anything about making the stage look pretty, so we didn't have any kind of plants or flowers or nice aesthetic. It was just I was what does it matter? This is Brahms. You guys don't need anything else, And then selling tickets and trying to build an audience. And then of course with the Dutch, I'm terrible at, writing the press releases and trying to get the marketing and all that stuff. So the process of that was very messy and up and down and just trying to put something together. But in terms of working with people, I was just able to find people at the conservatory here and meet a lot of people and get to make some friends and say, oh, I've got this concert series, let's put something together. And from there, it can really grow, because when you invite people, they invite you for their opportunities. And, I ended up doing a ton of accompanying here, too. It's just everywhere I go, it's you kind of find your rhythm. And then the process of that was that in order to get funding, we needed to become an official foundation. So then I had to become a board. I had to find a board, and then start applying for funding so that we can bring in bigger artists. And now I get to work with some incredible artists that I can bring in from Amsterdam and Paris and all these great cities. Actually, in 2 weeks, we have Deanna's coming to play with a good cellist friend of hers from Paris. And it's amazing to work with artists of this caliber and to say, I have this home where they can come and play in my series, and then they re-invite me to go play there. And it's just this beautiful exchange of musical collaboration.
Well, and to start all of this, basically from scratch, you're starting it all over again for this organization. It does take a lot of these skills that you're right, we didn't learn them in school. It's just not commonplace to be talking about the entrepreneurial side. So how did you learn those skills? Where did you acquire that yourself?
Yeah, by failing badly, I think. When you play a concert,
a lot of time, yeah.
Yeah, when you play a concert for 14 people, you're like, okay, this isn't working. And then, you kind of start to ask a lot of questions and talk to people. And people come up to you and they'll say oh, I know of this, newspaper that you should write a press release to. And then people will say, we really think more people should be here. It was such a great concert. And you think, yeah, but I don't have time to try and fill the seats and perform and sell the tickets. I'm literally printing the tickets on my home printer. I think there's this story of Stravinsky who was cleaning the toilets before a performance. And so it's this idea that the artist is literally doing everything. So then
Mhm.
I was in some really good leadership training at the church I was attending, and they were talking about the importance of building teams of people around you and empowering them to help in the vision of what you're doing. So I started to really
Mm.
think about that and bring on, for example, like my piano students to make kind of like a volunteer squad. It's like, okay, you guys are going to hand out programs and tickets, and then finding some regular attenders and inviting them to kind of become ambassadors and talk to their networks about that. And just slowly, I had this list once. It was like things that I can try and fail at, because I was listening to a lot of content around, again, taking the pressure off of having to get it right the first time. Selling 100 seats to your concerts in the first seasons, it just wasn't happening. And so, like, what are some ideas that I can try? Okay, I know this one expat woman who has a radio show, so let me talk to her. And it was just like
Mm.
pieces of like, then I joined the International Women's Club so that I could go talk to them and try to tell people about my concerts there. And then I started building my Instagram and my social media, and that started to bring slow. So it's been like little trickles of things that have kind of started to grow. And then now that I have this amazing board, they are taking the reins with the finances and the website, and they're keeping me on track. But that, I think that's what you need. Like, as artists,
Yeah.
we are the creatives. We are, and we've got a million notes to learn. Like, I can't handle it all. I literally can't. And I think if you want to build anything that's going to last and that's significant, then it has to be bigger than your capacity. And also, you want to make sure that what you create is going to last after you leave, because I'm not going to be here
Mhm.
forever, and I don't want what I've built to die. So that means I need to put systems and people in place that this
Yes.
organization can continue to grow. And even this morning, we were having a meeting with the board about bringing in conservatory students now. I also teach entrepreneurship at the Conservatorium in Maastricht here and in Rotterdam. And so, how can I empower young students, early 20s, where I was when I moved here, teach them what it's like. This is what it's like to run a series. This is what it's like to run, grant applications, to make a poster yourself on Canva at home, and like
Yep.
deal with, all the tickets and bringing people in, and, building a network and an audience and all this stuff. So even the idea of having like interns come in and volunteer for
Mm.
the organization, and just, yeah. So then I know that when I leave, I could pass it on to someone, and that's so
Yeah.
exciting to me.
And it's a challenge because we're so used to being completely attached to everything. Like as the performer, because you are responsible for everything, and because I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves that the experience is the experience of us on stage and listening to us, and so we want people to remember us in a positive light. So we'll take on all those things too and try to make it as smooth as possible. But it puts a lot of stress and pressure on an individual.
Yeah,
And you're right, like we don't have the skill set, and also in a lot of ways, nor do we need to.
exactly.
Like there are some things that you have to know, like networking, which you've obviously done a spectacular job of to build up the series and to meet all these people and to use those
Yeah,
connections to keep building everything. But then there's some things like the marketing and the branding and those aspects where, yes, on a high level, you need to have an awareness of it and know what the plan is. And then at a certain point as it's growing, you hire where your weaknesses are. And if Canva isn't a strong suit of yours, for example, then hiring a graphic designer or finding someone that can take on those tasks
yeah.
is really impactful.
I completely agree with you, and I think a lot of musicians don't, because that costs money, and they're
Mhm.
unhappy or nervous to put up the money first before you see the results. Because I know I've been there. I did realize,
Yep.
like, oh, okay, I can't continue to make posters in Word. I need help. Okay, so who can I find to be a graphic designer? Oh, wait, what? It's like how many hundreds? I'm like, am I really going to pay this when I could just do it myself? So you have to
Yep.
make that decision of, if you want to level up, that means you need to hand off. And are you ready to level up? Because then you're going to have to take more risk. And if musicians aren't used to taking risk in the business sense, because they don't see the reward initially or they don't know. And as you said, we're so independent. We're used to doing everything ourselves. So you're just like, oh, whatever, I'll just do it. Like, I'll just make the tickets. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
But the problem is that
Yeah,
you
it's not
stay
gonna take me that
small.
long.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But those little tasks, they really do add up.
yeah.
And every time that you have to, send an email yourself or print those tickets yourself or, be up at midnight cutting them out
Oh
and
my gosh.
getting them all ready for everyone.
How many?
I can picture it. I know.
Yeah,
I get it.
yeah,
And it is really going to take a toll on you because all that time that you're spending on that administrative work or the things that, again, are not in your wheelhouse and or should not have to be in your wheelhouse, they take you away from what really matters, which is the practice, the performance, the networking, the meeting other people, like spreading the word and making sure that the performance is really solid. And it causes a lot more stress. You can't take on as much, you can't perform as much. It limits you. So, what are some things
exactly.
that, I mean, it sounds like graphic design is probably an early one, but what were some things that you handed off pretty early?
Handing off would be things like setting up the chairs in the hall. Handing off would be printing the programs or designing the programs. Now I started sending my board member the headshots and bios, and he put it together in the program for me. Simple things like that. Or, announcing the concert before we walk on stage, welcoming the audience, serving the drinks after the concert. I mean, I tend to do the socials myself, but now I've got someone who translates for me from English to Dutch, so I don't need to overthink that. And now I have a lot of, I have a team of people who are sending the press release out to the marketing channels for me, because that's just completely overwhelming to me. And it is all things you think, oh, it's just a couple hours, I can do it. But I don't have the brain space, and I'm tired. That's just where I'm at right now. So I'm learning, painfully, slowly. Sometimes it's easy to think, I've been doing this for 5, 6, 7 years. It should be at this level by now. But again, I think overcoming perfectionism means that I need to embrace the process and just say, look, at least I'm not how I used to do things, and there is growth. And it's exciting. And the more you can get new people and fresh ideas in, and I'm learning to let go and let other people come in, and that it makes it better.
Absolutely. And every time you do delegate and bring someone else on, it probably feels like a risk still, but then the growth happens.
Yeah.
Do you think that every time you delegate and grow in that way, do you feel like it's paying off?
Yeah,
Consistently?
not yet. I mean, well, this morning we just had a meeting, so I'm thinking about that this morning. But, this idea of letting some conservatorium students open the concert with the first 10, 15 minutes, I think that's an amazing idea. But then it's just like, okay, what does that look like? And what is the process behind that? And do I make them like kind of audition? And then, just figuring out like what the new plan would look like. And then also like I've already planned the concerts, and there's a certain length to them, so you don't want it to be too long. So there's all these, it's not that I'm against the idea, but it's just, we've got to work out the details. But then again, like this means that when I do move away, I have people who have already performed in the series, and I could say, here you go, like take it and do something with it, please. So that it's not like, it's not about Michelle. It's about creating a society, like a chamber music society for the community.
Absolutely.
That's beneficial and more accessible, I think, than some of the other ones.
That's awesome. And so the vision obviously is long-term. We want this to be really, really sustainable. And in that process, you are branding away from yourself. I'm sure that when you started in 2016, taking on more of these performances, it probably was more about Michelle, because it is just you. You're the only person on that team at the time. What has the process been like of branding away from yourself? Is that comfortable all the time? Or does it feel like, this has been your baby and you're kind of giving some of that up a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, I'm still playing all the concerts for now, and I want to be, because again, this was my opportunity to invite really great artists to work with. This is like the reason that I kept the series going, even though it was like up and down with attendance. I thought, no, like this is my chance to, going back to creating structure in your life as a freelancer, having the rhythm of, we've got a concert, we have to get ready, we have to rehearse, really forced me. Deadlines make you move, right? So I needed that. I still need that. So I'm still playing all the concerts. I think the only thing I've delegated right now is like the financial planning and looking at the future programs for next season. But this is all a little fresh because I'm getting a new board actually this week. So it's kind of that process. But I'm just trying to show like I'm super open to ideas, and I understand that it might look different than what it used to. But I want it to look different, because the way I was doing it, again, it's not going to grow past a certain level if you don't learn how to hand off things and welcome people to come in. But of course, I was hesitant in the past to like give away the programming, because that was the reason I liked to do it in the first place. I'm like, no, like we're doing chamber music and we're doing Brahms. Yeah. So I think I'm still figuring out what it's going to look like, but I'm open to it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, outside of the series, obviously we talked about your recording. So it sounds like you'd been creating music or writing music on your own for a while, that you had other people encouraging you to record. Is that something that you'd been performing, or is that something that was just more for you and maybe closer family and friends?
Yeah, I was singing weekly in church on Sunday. So that was the only kind of like, if you want to call it performing experience that I had, was singing. And that's when people would just be really encouraging, like, oh, we love that. And then we started writing worship songs together on our music team at church. And then it was like, okay, like, we recorded a couple in the church, and then that was kind of like my teensy steps into this whole world, and never ever thought I'd be writing or releasing things on Spotify. I mean, this is like a whole new world for me. As a classical musician, I think a lot of us don't learn the distribution side or getting a producer. I mean, I didn't even know what a producer was 2 years ago. I'm like, what do they do? So It is a whole new process. Actually, during COVID, I took a songwriting class, and it was at 7 p.m.
Mm.
U.S. time. So like at 1 a.m., I was sitting in my couch, like trying to be awake to learn how to write songs better and how it would work to arrange and all that stuff. So, um, yeah, it's been a process. It's been cool. It's been like another side to express my artistry. I think it's also about like taking the box off of us as musicians.
Mm.
And I am someone who probably believed a lie for a long time that if you're going to be a serious classical musician, then that's all you can do. And if you do anything else, it's because you weren't good enough, or you don't take it seriously, or, you know, it's dumbed down music, or whatever you want to call it. I think there's still kind of that idea out there with some people. So it's like, well, I don't know. And then even with my social media, it's like, I don't know how to talk about this because everyone who comes to my page knows me as a classical pianist. So how do I now show this other side? And it's like, what if you just be yourself? What if you just say, this is who I am? You know, I changed my Instagram name to This is Michelle Lynne because of that idea. Like this is all of the artist, and this is what I'm going to try and build an audience around. And it's going to look different. And I think that's a good thing because we're supposed to be finding our unique selling points. You know, if we come back to like the branding and marketing, it's like, well, maybe this is it. And you just need to embrace it and say, I do both and I love both.
It's hard. It's a limiting construct that we have in the classical music world is, you know, you do one thing, you do one thing only. And I think it bleeds into even what we do with our classical music, you know, performing, you know, maybe you're just a soloist or you're mostly a chamber player or you know, primarily are a private teacher. There's not a whole lot of
Crossover.
crossover identity. Or if there's one thing that you want to be known for, you just don't talk about the other
Right.
things. Like, I am a performer. And like, yeah, I teach a couple lessons on the side, but I'm a performer. And we pick one identity. Has this pivot over the last couple of years, as you know, especially in the, I guess the last really 6 months since you crowdfunded and started recording, has that caused some kind of internal conflict for you of like, you know, am I still a classical musician or do you feel really comfortable now? Like this is Michelle Lynne. This is who I am and I'm happy in this situation, maybe having
Yeah.
faceted career.
No, it's a good question. I mean, I think we attach our identity so strongly to our instruments that like, I know through and through I'm a pianist. Like I live and breathe, you know, I feel so comfortable behind the instrument. So I don't think that's ever been a question, but it was more about just like, in terms of my content and showing, what do I share?
Mm.
How do I talk about this? How do I share, you know, and creating a balanced, you know, so for example, in my piano account, which I still call a piano account, I don't talk about the Fearless Artist so much, the business entrepreneurial side, because I understand that the people who are coming to my page are looking for performances, or looking for piano content, or looking for maybe now hopefully songs. So they don't really care maybe so much about building the entrepreneurial musician stuff. But then it was just like, well, how do I share about both? And yeah, you don't want to be seen as, yeah, but then it's like, well, I don't really care how people see me. You know, on one sense, we need to care how people see us, and on the other hand, you don't want to care at all. And so I take a lot of inspiration from other big name crossover artists like Matt Heimovitz. He's a fantastic cellist in Montreal who does a ton of crossover stuff, and he's got some students who do the same thing where they're doing covers. And you know, now I think more classical musicians are open, especially during COVID, to playing covers on TikTok, for example. And like, there's nothing wrong with playing well-known pop pieces on your classical instrument and showing like, we've got the chops to do it. Like, how much more fun is it when we can like whip it off because we've trained? So I don't know. It's kind of overcoming these, as you said, limiting constructs, and then just figuring out how to talk about it. But I think I was kind of always trying to hide my singing side because I didn't want to be maybe seen as, I don't know. Yeah, or maybe just like I'm not. Yeah, also when you work so hard in one area of your life, you're like, okay, well, this is just something I do on the side for fun. But then it's like, okay, no, I'm starting to take it like, well, now I have taken it seriously for a while, but it's just a process of discovery, I think, and seeing what feels good to you. And I love it so much. And I think, you know, there's this idea that when you find something that brings you joy, it's connected to your purpose. And just singing for me, I love it so much. It brings me joy. And then as soon as you start comparing yourself, you'll start to feel discouraged and think like, oh no, I should not be doing this because look at so-and-so and they've studied so much more and they're singing in all these places and they have worked with these teachers and they did all these acting classes. And it's like, well, that's fine. Like, I admire them so much, but that doesn't mean that I have to do that in order to be worth recording.
Yes,
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's something I think that TikTok and Instagram in particular have really opened up for a lot of musicians is like I can record those covers or also I can just record my
Yes.
practice or I can record rehearsal and share it and that is
Yes.
okay. And what's interesting on that too is I think for a lot of students on kind of on the younger side of things right now, if you're seeing a lot of these pages and a lot of musicians pages or even a lot of there's kind of like these little micro influencers that have popped up for each instrument as well and a lot of them are still in school
Mm-hmm.
and these are students that are currently at Juilliard and they've got 100,000 200,000 followers on TikTok and everyone's consuming that content. It's really good content. Most of it is them practicing, and I think sometimes that can also cause a little bit of conflict when you're watching that and not participating in that, when you don't know what the content creation process looks
Mm.
like. You're still just seeing what honestly is a finished
Mm-hmm.
product, even if that individual doesn't feel like it is. So it's an interesting kind of conundrum that we're all in right now. Like it's easier for us to share more of our work and it's easier for us to share more parts of our work more freely and more openly. But then also, there's this elevated expectation that, this is what it has to look like to be a musician. You look at one of those pages and they're posting 3 TikToks a day of them practicing. And I think that also puts pressure on people that are watching that.
Yeah.
So anyway, as someone that has a larger social media following, you're balancing multiple accounts. You kind of talked about trying to decide where to place
Yeah.
content appropriately on those accounts, but how do you decide what to record and what to share? Or are you really, conceptualizing that content with each account specifically in mind?
No, it's good that you mentioned that because that's interesting. Because the whole point of practicing is to show the process. But if we're getting this like curated
Hmm.
process, that's not authentic. So,
Right.
um,
They took 25 takes and picked the best one still. Yeah.
exactly with the right camera and the fancy lighting and all.
Yeah.
Um, so a couple of years ago, I was starting to, for me, overcoming this perfectionism thing has been embracing process, embracing the small steps that in the past I would have rolled my eyes at and been like, well, that's ridiculous. You should be practicing 6 hours a day or else you're not a real pianist and you just don't have what it takes and you need to work harder. Like that's my old mindset.
Yep.
So I was like, okay, I'm going to start to share little clips of me playing on Instagram. Very careful, like little things, nothing big, just whatever. And then I had this thought one night that I was like, I know so many amazing musicians who would never do this because they've been told never let anyone hear you if you're under your top level, or they think no one's interested, or they don't want to record because they don't want to hear themselves, or, name any limiting belief. And I'm like, man, these guys are awesome and I would love to hear them. So I started this challenge. It just came to me kind of all at once. Killing perfectionism in classical, 10 days, 5 takes max, you hit post. Let's do this. So I ranted on my socials for a bit. I invited some people to join. I started the week after. We had 75 people join the first time that I ever did
Oh,
this.
that's awesome.
There was like this huge wave of people saying, yes, I need this. I need to overcome this hurdle all the time of every day worrying about someone hearing me and thinking that I suck because I don't play perfectly. And also, the self-condemnation, the self-criticism, and just getting used to that recording button being on there. It makes you way more aware. You can't practice passively when you know that you're recording. So I had all these people
Right.
writing and they were like, I recorded myself 15 times and I listened to all of them and I hated all of them and I deleted. I'm like, no, you have 5 takes. You have to
That's
post.
not the point.
And from this killing perfectionism thing, I've been thinking about running it again. It just kind of, the conversation opened up so much about why are we so hard on ourselves? Why are we afraid to show that it takes time to learn? Why are we afraid to show process? And someone that I greatly admire is Hilary Hahn, because she's one of the only greats that I know who's practicing on her socials and saying like, look, this is what it looks like. And she sounds awesome, but we just have so much respect for her because she's like, when someone at that level is vulnerable, they pave the way for everyone else to share. So I think that's what this
Right.
challenge did because we were all doing it at the same time. And I was doing my like go Michelle stuff. So I was resharing every single post and I was tagging and I was everywhere and I was liking. And I didn't sleep for the first week, I think, of doing this. I was just on my phone or recording. And also it helped me so much because you hate what you hear the first day.
Yeah.
And then you listen back 3 days later and you're like, that was pretty good. Or like, that was beautiful. What a beautiful phrase. Why do we think that we can only improve by being critical? Why don't we think we can improve by, encouraging what we like about our playing and saying, let's do more of that. Take what's working and make it bigger. Go deeper with that. Find the sound you want and then use that. Focus on what you want. Why do we not teach like this?
Yeah.
I've had people say like my teachers used to count my mistakes. It's like, you learn to focus on the negative. And I still focus, I hear clips back of me performing, if I play for Candlelight, and like I can hear every wrong note, because you're just hoping like, okay, if somebody hears this, you don't know who's hearing it, what people are thinking. That can make you go crazy. Because of course we want to be seen as excellent. We want to be appreciated. We want to contribute something valuable. You don't want to come on stage and not be prepared. But yeah, I've kind of had to let go of a lot of that.
And it's something that I think forms for a lot of musicians really early on. I mean, I have early memories of like, uh, teachers saying to me like, "Well, you're such a musical player," and what that really said to me in my mind was, "I'm not a
Yep.
technical player." And that was something that even when I was in grad school, I was struggling with immensely. And I was trying to articulate that because you've got all these weird messages in your head and jumbled feelings. And, you can play something in the practice room and then you go to your lesson and genuinely what was totally fine in the practice room falls apart. And in your head, you're like, well, that's just because I'm just not a technical player. Like you repeat those things to yourself
Yeah.
all the time. And then you watch other people get praised for the things that you're weak in, and it gets so, it really does cause a lot of internal conflict. And I think in a lot of ways it holds musicians back. Whatever we were told we were good at or bad at when we were younger, or, if a teacher's counting mistakes or whatever the situation is, we really do internalize that. And it's at that point, now it's not just, your playing that's being criticized because the instrument is your identity. It's also your identity that's being
Yeah.
criticized and who you are as a
Exactly.
human. So as you're growing and trying to try these new things, it is scary. Putting yourself out there on Instagram, terrifying. But what made you start posting? I know we talked about this, consistency that you've had and trying to build the concert series and doing all these things, but why did you start originally?
I mean, I so recognize what you're saying about when someone criticizes your playing, they're criticizing you, and that just to, separating how we play from who we are is still such a challenge. And so I was totally stuck in like, I think there was a lot of shame and insecurity and so low confidence with what I was, or not even being able to recognize what I could do if I could overcome these jumbled feelings, as you're saying, or like worried about what everyone thinks or not being good enough, or just wanting to fit in and wanting to be part of the good ones, whatever that means. So I worked with a life coach for a long time who specializes in like performing artists. She works at an acting school in California, and she has a course there called The Wholehearted Artist. And I just came to her and she was like, "You need to get shame out of the voice that you hear, number one, in your mind, in your heart, because all you have is this like condemnation, this criticizing stuff." So it was like a lot of time with her, kind of unraveling things that I'd learned, the ways I was thinking, fixed mindset, growth mindset. So I don't know. I think, again, as such a community person, I think I started to find other people who were experiencing similar things, or it really inspires me. Like when I'm feeling low in motivation, I'm a visual person. I look for someone who's doing what I want to do. And I put that in my mind. I'm like, oh, that's what it would look like. Okay, how can I do that? So I think when I was starting to share content, well, first of all, I knew I needed to share something, like, little videos, and then finding other people who did it, and then starting conversations, and then getting encouragement. People started leaving really beautiful comments on my posts. And I'm like, who are these strangers? Like, they're so nice. And that was just so inspiring, because you're like, okay, well, that's good motivation. That's a positive reward. I'm going to keep going with this. And not that it's like, playing for praise, but it's just like, I felt genuinely appreciated. And then finding other people who were doing that too, and then hearing how much better I was getting. Plus, you just start to read more about, if you want to get better faster, you need to record. It's the fastest way. Recorder doesn't lie. So it's like, okay, suck it up. Let's go. So again, like these little things that start to compile, you're like, oh yeah, this is definitely worth doing.
And it's interesting, that shame piece, because I know a lot of musicians will do like 100 days of practice challenge on social media, but they'll do it on a private account.
Right.
They'll do it on a separate account that's not their
Right.
personal account. And again, like we're hiding it. It's there for the accountability, but also it's not actually there. We're keeping it in secret. And as you're sharing this content and getting more positive feedback, was that something that it sounds like you weren't expecting it, but did that help motivate you to keep going, or did you ever have negative comments and kind of question things? I mean, obviously feedback is a large part of that motivation for musicians.
I've been very fortunate to not have negative feedback yet. I'm assuming it'll come later, and I'm kind of stealing myself. So no, that wasn't part of it. I agree with you about the wanting to hide thing, which I think there can be multiple reasons for that. Some people are thinking, oh, I don't want to bother my friends and family with my playing because they don't want to see this, so I'm not going to post. And I'm like, come on, your friends and family are the ones who want to see it. Why would we not want to see
Mhm.
you doing your thing and sharing your work? I mean, especially if we want to bring this message of classical musicians to a younger generation, well, then they need to actually know what it would be like to come to a concert. And if we don't ever show this, I mean, that's why I love social media so much, because it gives people little snippets, little teasers of like, come check out this concert. It's going to be awesome. So yeah, having that process, and finding other people who are doing it, you just find your community, your kind of niche community, and then yeah, when you know that you belong somewhere, it's easy to keep that kind of going.
It is. And the more that you're getting that positive feedback, it feeds it. Because at one point, what was scary, posting, starting, sharing, now like you almost had this positive pressure in the other direction of, well, now people are expecting to see my
Mm-hmm.
content. They're expecting something from me. They want me to be posting regularly. Is that something that you feel right now in your own creation or your own output?
I feel the more that I've heard people say something positive, like, I love, a lot of people love this killing perfectionism message. So then I know that if
Mm,
I'm silent, it's usually because of fear. And if I'm not posting,
mm.
practicing, it's usually because of fear. And so it's very easy to fall back into that, yeah, fear of being judged and worrying about what people think about you. So I think, and with anything that you do, as you just said, when you do it, you become more comfortable and you get over that, all the noise in your head. So it's better to stay in it and to force yourself to be doing it regularly so that it doesn't feel scary anymore. But as soon as you shrink back into this smaller version, that's when the fear can come back. So I actually haven't posted a practicing video in a while, probably because it's like, it's so easy to think like, oh, who wants to hear this? But anyway, what I want to say about the killing perfectionism is I started to feel more of a responsibility. Like, people are positively
Mm.
impacted when I speak up and use my voice. And that's one of the main messages I share with others. Like, if you stay small, it benefits no one because you have gifts and strengths that people need. You are making a positive impact in your community. And if you're hiding because you're worried about what people think about you, then everyone loses. And so it's overcoming these uncomfortable feelings and putting yourself out there. I mean, being a leader means you have to stick your neck out and risk looking stupid. And maybe sometimes you are, something I heard recently was like the 30-30-30 rule. 30% of people will like you, 30% won't care, 30% don't. So now I'm kind of learning to say, okay, find your 30, the ones who like you, and leave the rest. And let's just focus on the people who need the message. And not everyone needs to be your fan, and that's okay. My music's not for everyone, my performances aren't for everyone. Um, Actually, it helped me a lot. I did get a bad review recently on a performance, and somebody said something like, "Next time, get a
Mm.
different pianist," and I just laughed because I mean, it was after like 100. First of all, it was like 100 positive things, and then just like one person who was grumpy that day, and I was like, "Okay, you're just not part of my 30," and it helped me so much. And as a former fixed mindset person, I was so proud of myself to be able to dismiss negative feedback so quickly. Like, I didn't go to bed thinking about it.
Mhm.
It's like, okay, this is good. This is a very good thing because the bigger you go, the more negative people are going to come. And, I have a friend who blew up on TikTok. Her name's Kristen. She's Harpist KT. And she said these people basically stop treating you like you're human. Like, they comment on your page as
Mhm.
if you're a thing, an object. They don't realize you're a person with feelings, that you're like creating content, putting yourself out there. People are commenting on her appearance or on her playing face. I mean, we all have playing faces. My sister's made fun of my playing face
Yep.
since I was 13. And so people say these terrible things. And I was like, I'm sorry. Where's your content? I'm sorry. What do you do for a
Yeah.
living? Like, am I going to come to your workplace and criticize you? Like, next time, switch out the accountant. I can say it's just kind of funny at this point if
Yep.
you put it in this perspective. So, I don't know, learning to take the pressure off, not making everything so high stakes. And that's really what I learned from my life coach, Ella. Yeah.
And it's interesting because we put ourselves in a situation our entire lives where at least once a week we're in a room with someone who's supposed to tell us the things that we need to improve on. Like, that's the whole goal of what we're doing. And yet in public, when it's not that teacher or it's not someone that you are asking for feedback from, it is absolutely devastating to hear some of those negative things, especially when you're building up that tolerance and you haven't experienced that a lot yet. I know with our business, I think I was coaching clients for 6 to 8 months before I ever started posting on my personal Facebook and Instagram that I was doing this. And you're right, it absolutely comes from fear. Like, what are people going to think of me? Especially when you're presenting is more business focused and entrepreneurial. That is not a musician mindset. That's something we tend to also shame and shun is, we should do it for the love of the music, not to make a living, but we have to make a living
Right.
somehow. So as you've continued to grow this and find this consistency, what are some, like the 30 thing is brilliant and I love that. Are there other tools and resources that have helped to keep you going and stay
Yeah, Brene
consistent?
Brown changed my life. Her
Mm.
book, Rising Strong, and also the whole concept of the man in the arena, and so I'm really at the point where I would rather be in the arena bleeding than sitting in the sidelines in fear. And I'm bleeding a lot, I have to say. Like all of my performances, like I share the best clips, but there are things that I would like to redo. Or, just had a review of our last mastermind launch with my team. And it's like, there are things that we are working on. And so, but it's better if you want to grow, you need to be out of this little comfort zone that we like to stay hiding in. And also, she talks about the cheap seats. So when you're sitting in the arena, you've got the people who are sitting in the nosebleeds and they're chucking tomatoes at you and they're booing. And it's like, I'm sorry, are you in the center of attention in the arena, pouring your heart out for everyone? No. So so Brene Brown says, I'm not going to receive feedback from you unless I see you being brave in your domain too. Because unless you're putting yourself out there, you have no right to come into my world and tell me that I should be doing it differently. So that has helped me a lot, particularly with that comment that I mentioned. I was just like, well, I don't know what you do for a living, and I don't know if you have any musical training, so I'm not going to weigh or give this comment any weight. And then another thing is, the Muppets, the two grumpy old guys who sit in the balcony and they like yell nasty comments. I mean, those are literally who I imagine now if I think of the cheap seats. Those are the guys sitting in the cheap seats. They're just being jerks. And the idea is don't
Yeah.
listen to the cheap seats. Listen to and you need to protect yourself. You need your core people. You have your husband, your friends, your family. I've got Deanna. And it's like, if Deanna says to me that my playing, they should have switched up the pianist, that's when I'm going to get really concerned. That's when I'm going to go to bed crying. Because I greatly value her opinion. I know that she's an excellent musician.
Yeah.
I know that she's put in her hours and hours of practicing and she knows what she's talking about. So, and I also know that she would never say that because if she does have something to improve on my playing, she would bring it with compassion and with kindness, which would, and then help me get better because I would want to improve and work in the way that she was suggesting. So in that way, you build up a tolerance and it becomes very easy to dismiss things that are from the exterior world. It's like, I'm just going to focus on my crew, my little circle here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's something that you have to continue to build up. Keep finding those people that are like-minded, they're doing similar things that you're also inspired by and excited about, and just keep bringing everybody
Exactly.
closer because you talked about like stealing yourself up. That's how you do it, is to have the people that matter
Yeah.
closer to you. And then when things that don't matter happen, you're able to distance yourself and you've got
Yeah.
a buffer of people who can, be a better actual critique or a better sounding board for you. Now, because you have so many plates in the air, you have so many things that you're doing, what are some things that help you to stay organized and feel like you are managing everything on an ongoing basis?
Man. So I just recently,
That was such a big
I'm like,
oh, goodness. The
what are
$1,000,000
these
question.
things? Systems and processes. Spreadsheets have changed my life. I mean, all this boring stuff. I'm not 100% on it at all. I've learned that something is better than nothing. I've learned that, opening the spreadsheet and marking one small thing is infinitely better than me saying, I can't handle that right now, I'll avoid it. So just like, it's the same as working out at the gym. You're like, I would just do 15 minutes over doing like the full on hour workout. I'm kind of trying to apply that to like the organization side. So something we do in our membership is co-working sessions that has changed my life. We come on Zoom, we set an intention, go on mute. You've got 1 hour monotasking. That's a huge thing for me. My brain is like in 10 different directions all the time. So I'm really trying to learn how to focus on one task. And the risk is that I fear that I'll forget something, which is why I keep jumping back and forth all the tabs in my head. So, I recently had someone train me on how to use Asana. I don't use Asana perfectly. I've got a bunch of expired tasks, but the point is that I'm a lot further than I was 6 months ago and I'm growing. So, that I also just hired a personal assistant. So now I'm asking her to do things like bookings for me, my calendar. She's sending out podcast pitches. She's helping me remember things. She's helping me create content. I can't run 2 social media accounts, plus engage with everybody, plus DM them and welcome them. It's just insane. So she's doing a lot of that for me. So again, like if you want to build something, you need to get people around you and the legs to your table and bringing people who understand the vision and who you can trust. And I'm very fortunate to have Deanna and Aida and to learn from them as well and work together. And then in terms of, I just try to find rest in my life, in my day, starting the mornings. I brain dump in my journal. I read some scripture in the morning to try and focus. I have amazing neighbors who go to church with them, and just finding that peace in my life, having a bath on a random weekday, anything I can do to try and bring like my stress level lower. And especially right now, it's just like a very busy, I've got 10 concerts this March, plus we just finished a launch, and I have like my conservatorium jobs, and I've got a bunch of marking. And so it's just like, okay, 1 hour in this direction, and then I'll try and switch, that kind of thing, instead of doing it all at once, which is what I've done in the past.
Yeah. Yes. It's easy to stretch yourself thin when you've got so many things going on, but I love the idea of just, setting that intention and having one thing to focus on, because you're right. I mean, if you can just log in and do something to promote your music, your teaching, whatever work you're doing right now in your craft, something is always better than nothing. And so even if it's just, telling one person today that you teach private lessons, or, reaching out to one venue and getting information, it doesn't have to be a massive amount of work. You don't have to spend an entire Saturday working. Just do something and move on with your life, and then enjoy the rest of it.
I think I completely agree. And something is creating very specific goals. So even today, like I learned a concept called move the needle. So what tasks can I do today that will make the most impact on my progress? What are the leverage points? I wake up and I think, what are my leverage points today? So one of them is like email 10 radio stations about my upcoming single on Friday. And that's a very clear goal. So when you give your brain clarity, I mean, I know you know this, but it was just like still so revolutionary for me to think, like, instead of being completely overwhelmed, like, oh no, I need to email radios that my single's coming out. It's like, okay, how's 10? Can I open my radio database, find the first 10 on the spreadsheet, and just start with that first email, And I have this app called Flow Lab, and it's for high performance athletes and performing artists. And they talk a lot about how to get into flow state. And it's all about creating that focus and like what's directly in front of you, staying in the moment and not letting your brain go into this kind of panic of thinking about everything at once. So yeah, creating very specific, small 3 tasks a day kind of thing, starting there.
And it's easier now than ever to get distracted. I mean, you've got a million different channels of communication where people can get a hold of you, and you've got your phone and your computer and the TV's on, and your Apple Watch and all those things. That one thing that always really helps too is as you're in that state, just take those things away. Only open up the windows that you need. Take off. For example, like recording the episode today, I took off my Apple Watch because the second it buzzes, there's always that little like temptation of where you got to look down, and you want to make sure that you're totally in that zone. And so just removing distraction and picking the 1 or 2 easy things for you to kind of take off that list, it really does make it.
Another you messaged for resources. Adam Grant is someone that I follow on Instagram. I highly appreciate his content, and he was actually talking about how our brain gets really happy when we focus solely on one task for, say, an extended amount of time, an hour or something. And I find that when I do what you just said, take away all the distractions, that's what we do in our co-working sessions, all the tabs are closed except one, and you're not checking your phone. I feel so good after. My brain's like, whew, I don't know what it is. I mean, obviously it's some kind of chemical release, but it's like, okay, like I feel like there's progress, there's clarity, my brain has rest. So that's been really cool. And I made this mistake a couple weeks ago, and I had a friend say to me, like, the problem, I think the idea is that you don't want to open all the tabs at once in your head, all the boxes. Cause I was like, and then I have this, and then I have this, and there's it. It's like, that doesn't help you. It doesn't help you to start naming, even you said taking off your watch. It's because as soon as you see the text, you're like, oh no, I'm supposed to send them that email, and that means I have to do this thing, and I haven't thought about that. Because
you just spiral.
It's like, oh, sorry, what was your question? Like, if I'm going to do anything, I got to stay.
Yeah. Absolutely. And what's hard too is that, when you're talking to people that, or okay, you're taking a lot of content or you're talking to people in your network that have really good ideas, it also is really tempting to do what everybody else is doing and not staying
Yeah.
your course also. And so having those really clear defined goals is helpful, not only in that moment to make sure the task is done, but on a bigger picture to kind of avoid that
Yeah.
shiny object syndrome. We kind of laugh like roughly once a week we have an ideas meeting because in particular my husband Isaac is an idea machine. Like it's terrifying how many thoughts he has in the day that are
Mm.
all really good. And so we have to kind of, narrow that list down because there's a million sticky notes on my desk at all times with things that we're working on and ideas that I have. And if I let that
Yeah.
take over, you're never going to get
Yes.
anything done. So I love that idea of just, picking one, giving yourself defined goals with metrics, like setting a number for it so it's not so ambiguous. It
Mm.
really does make a difference in productivity. Absolutely. Are there any other productivity hacks that have really helped you? Anything else that's made an
Oh, you were
impact?
just saying something that was, yeah, staying in your lane. One thing I heard, it was actually someone teaching about how to teach a private lesson that you want to think in levels. So you're like, okay, I
Mm,
can see that they're in level one. I'm going to make sure that, for example, all the rhythm is clear. Then in level two, we're going to make sure that the fingering is done. Then level three, we're going to look at the dynamics. And it was just like, whoa. Because I think my teaching style was like trying to fix everything at once.
mm,
And I'm like, fix this here,
yeah.
do this here, because that's also how I was taught. Like, do it all and do it right now, and I'm gonna sit here and watch you, and so. And on one sense, I
Yep.
think it's good to work like that, but in the other sense, if it's beginner student, like they need to understand layers. So I think, for example, I'm
Mm-hmm.
releasing this single on Friday, and I'm working through a program of 22 days of how to release a single. And he gets to day 12 and he's like, okay, today's the day you're going to set up your ads. And I literally was just like, you know what? That's not for me. Like this concept,
Mm,
I don't have the space for that. I don't have the brain space for that. I'm just going to skip this and allow that with no shame, no pressure. I'm not thinking, oh no, I failed. Oh no, I can't keep going. And then you end up getting stuck at day 12 instead of understanding like, let's just put that aside for now and move to day 13. And guess what? I've got 3 other singles coming in the next 3-4 months. So maybe in 3 months from now, I'll have brain space for ads. And that was kind of I was so like impressed with you listen to your brain. You're like, wow, good job, brain. I'm so proud of you for not going into a shame spiral that you're never going to be good enough to figure out Facebook ads. And
yeah.
how come you haven't done it by now? And so's done it by now. And that's why she's at 6 figures and you're not.
Yep.
It's like you're already 34. So don't you know you should
Yep.
have it all done by now? And it's like, okay, let's not talk to ourselves like that. Let's not agree with that kind
Yeah.
of thinking anymore. Because that held me back for so long.
Absolutely. And the more you celebrate the positive, the more enticing and exciting it is to keep doing those positive things. I would always rather refine a process than completely eliminate it and try
Right.
something completely different. And that's something that we see, I'm sure you see it a lot with people that you work with too. Like we try something one or two times, doesn't go perfectly according to plan, and our tendency is just to jump to something completely different. And that's why, people look at, your social media with, 6, 7,000 followers on Instagram. They're like, wow, how has she done that? Well,
Yeah.
repetition and refinement and learning that process over and over again, which is something that obviously you're doing really well, and,
That's
and
really
keeping
kind.
that focus is why you are able
Yeah,
to
thank
balance
you.
all this.
Nicole, my business coach, she says, do something 100 times before you make a tweak because you need the data. She's really, really taught me how to track and,
Mm-hmm.
things like KPIs, your key performance
Yes.
indicators, all of this language that we're like, I'm a musician. I don't want to talk like this, but, somehow I am sometimes. So my KPIs tell me that unless I try something multiple times, how can you tell if it's working or not? Or I heard your analogy, what you just
Mm-hmm.
said in terms of like a workout plan. People try something 3 times, it doesn't work. Well, I better jump to the next diet. It's like, no, things take time. I don't know. I think that's like another, you're saying hack. A hack is just learning that things take time. And like,
Yes.
as you're saying, stay the
Patience.
course, keep the fire on,
Yeah.
but don't overdo it because then you'll burn out and give up and go cry, right? It's just like, give it like a consistent pressure forward and then see where the doors open. And, something we really take seriously is once you
Mm-hmm.
find something that works, go into it 200%. And don't worry about the rest. You have to learn how to eliminate the noise and the distractions as we're talking about. So for us, like we promoted our mastermind. We have like a small group that's high level, high intensity. But then we did a free month of our membership and we're doing it right now until the end of March. And we had like 18 signups like immediately. And we were like, whoa, like this is huge for us to have these people jump in. So now we need to shift and work with this because this is what's working. And You know, we want to still keep the overall strategy of what we wanted to do, but when you see something that kind of works, when the fish jump in the boat, you got to move. So, and when you know, in
Yep.
terms of building the Instagram, it's like when anyone comes to a concert, I'm sending them a personal hello and thank you for being there tonight. And then they usually tell me how much they loved it. So that creates connection. Then they say, let us know when the next one is. So if you want to talk about how to build a fan base or networking, it's those things and that take time, but are very, very much worth it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Playing the
Yeah,
long game. That's always the key. So, yeah, we call them productivity hacks, but in reality, you're absolutely right. It's refining those processes, paying attention to what's working, and then putting more time and energy and effort into it. Even if it's working on a small
exactly.
level, it doesn't have to be massive
Yeah.
success right out of the gate, but you did something and you had three more attendees because of an activity that you did or a post that you made on social media, or you found one student because you posted in a local Facebook group. When those things work, we need to keep refining them and figuring out how to improve that process to have more impact, as opposed to just like completely annihilating it and saying, well, that only got three attendees and this other thing got 10. You want those other three also, and that could probably be more. So absolutely, just staying the course is so important. It really is. Michelle, this has been so much fun. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation with you, especially talking about the workings of your business and all these things that you're working on right now. I think maybe if we could wrap up with just one kind of parting thought for someone that is looking for a career that looks like yours right now, that wants to be performing and maybe running a series or really active in the performance campaign in the way that you are right now. What is the one big piece of advice that you would want them to have today?
You find your voice by using it. So many musicians
Mm.
are silent out of fear because they are afraid, as we talked about, being judged, not being good enough. What are people going to think? Being cringy. Don't want to post on TikTok because TikTok's just for dancing. It's like, yeah, but you're going to find your place by starting to think and speak and share. And then you're going to see what feels good, what works for you, what you like talking about. I mean, I would not be teaching at two conservatories entrepreneurship if I hadn't started talking about entrepreneurship and if I hadn't started saying, hey, this is what I think is wrong with how we were taught and this is how we can get better and things I never could have imagined this. So you don't know what's possible. That's the other thing. And you've been told your career is going to look a certain way. You've been told there are certain limits on your career, and none of that is true. Coming back to Kristen, my harpist friend, she studied at the best schools in the world. She's top of her game. She's got the best chops. She could play at any major orchestra. And now she's playing on an electric harp with a loop pedal and she's doing covers and selling her transcripts and she loves it. She's got joy. She's got influence. She's inspiring people. She's teaching millions of people about the harp. I mean, I just think, why do we have to say that a life or career of success looks like blank? And if you don't have that, then you're not enough. That's just not true.
Mm.
So you have something unique and you have your own skills and strengths and you're going to discover them as you use them. Yeah.
Absolutely. I would 100% agree. And I really appreciate that insight. I think it's something that applies in all stages of our career, is coming back to who you are as a musician and what you want to express. And it's easy to get lost in that, but keeping that at the forefront not only means more success, because that excitement and that passion is, you know, it's infectious. It absolutely spreads quickly. But beyond that, the more fulfillment you have, the easier it is to keep going. So I totally resonate with everything that you're saying, and I really appreciate you sharing
Well, it's
that.
been so great to chat with you. I think we have so much in common. We think so
Yeah.
similarly. So it's really great to share that.